Good morning, my dear and wonderful friends. Welcome to our weekly Parsha Shiur. This week we are studying Parshas Vayechi, which means, of course, that this Shabbos is Shabbos Chazak, when we conclude the first of the five Chamoshim. And as we do, we shout Chazak, Chazak, V'nis Chazek. May Hashem bless us all with chizuk, with strength, with good health, with many brachas, and please God, an end to this insane pandemic. And all good things, health for all good Jews everywhere. If you'd like to follow along and you have a chumash in front of you, I am going to be studying together from the Parsha, Parshas Vayechi, Perek Mem Ches, chapter 48, Posuk Ches, verse 8. Vayar Yisrael es Bnei Yosef, the Torah is wrapping up the story of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Avram has passed, Yitzchak has passed, and now Yaakov has come to the conclusion of his 147 years, 130 of which Yaakov describes were ma'at v'roim, were few and painful, difficult, even evil. But the last 17 years of Yaakov's life were wonderful. He lived with his family, he lived in Mitzrayim, there was a yeshiva, there was plenty of good food, Baruch Hashem. But now Yaakov is coming to the conclusion of his own life, and he is going to bid farewell to his sons. But before he does, he summons his son Yosef. And Yosef comes, and Yosef brings his two sons. Vayar Yisrael es Bnei Yosef, Perek Mem Ches, Posuk Ches. Yaakov, also referred to in the Torah as Yisrael, sees Yosef's sons. Vayomer, and he says, Mi Ela, who are these? Vayomer Yosef Aloviv, and Yosef says to his father, Bonaihem, these are my sons. Asher nosan li elikim bozeh, that Hashem has given me, Hashem has blessed me with these two sons. Vayomer, and Yaakov says, Kochem no elai, take them, bring them to me. Vavorachem, and I shall bless them before I pass. Ve'ena Yisrael, says the Torah, Posuk Yud, Ve'ena Yisrael kovdu mizoiken, the eyes of Yaakov are heavy with old age, they're weak with old age. Lo yuchal liros, he's not able to see. Vayagesh Yosef Elov, and Yosef brings his sons to his father Yaakov. Vayishak lohem, and he kisses them. Vayachabek lohem, and he embraces them. Vayomer Yisrael Yosef, and Yaakov Yisrael says to Yosef, Roifa nechaloi filolti, I did not know if I would see your face. I didn't think I would ever see you again. Behold, Yaakov has tremendous gratitude. Hashem has showed me not just you, my dear son Yosef, but also your children. Vayoytze Yosef oisameim, Birkov, Yosef takes his children away from the lap, from the legs of his father. Vayishtachul ap of Arza, and they all bow down to Yaakov. Vayikach Yosef es shneim, and now Yosef is going to bring his sons back to his father Yaakov for a bracha. So Yaakov takes both of his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. As Ephraim biminoi, he puts Ephraim, Yosef puts Ephraim on his right side. Mismoil Yisrael on the left side of Yaakov. Ves Manasseh bismoilei, Manasseh on his left side, Mimin Yisrael, on the right of Yaakov, Vayagesh Elov, and he brings his sons, Yosef brings his sons once again to his father Yaakov, to bless them before Yaakov's passing. Vayishlach Yisrael es Yaminoi, and Yaakov, Yisrael, sends his right hand, Vayoshes al Rosh Ephraim, and puts it on the head of Ephraim. V'hu hatzoyer, despite him being the youngest son, Vesmoiloi, and his left hand al Rosh Manasseh, on the head of Manasseh, despite him being the older son. Sikeles Yodav, he crossed his hands, he switched it over. Ki Manasseh ha-bechor, because Manasseh was the older son. Vayevorech Yosef, and he blesses Yosef, and he says, he gives Yosef a beautiful bracha, which we're not going to get into right now. And the pasuk continues in pasuk Yud Zayin 17. Vayar Yosef, and Yosef saw that Yaakov had switched his hands. Vayera be'enov, Yosef didn't like it. Yosef was upset. Vayismoich yad oviv, and he leans over, he takes his father's hands. He lifts his father's, he takes hold of his father's hand. To remove it from Ephraim's head and put it on the head of Manasseh. Vayomer Yosef, and Yosef says to his father, Pasuk Yud Ches, Elov Yosef says to his father, Loi chein avi, this is not correct, my father. Kizeh haBachoir, because this one, Menashe, is the older son. Sim yamincha al roishay, place your right hand on his head. Vayemoin Oviv, and Yaakov refuses. Vayomer, and he says, Yodati b'ni Yodati. I know, my son, I know. He, Menashe, will also be a great nation. Gam hu yilam v'gam hu yigdol v'ulam. However, Ochiv HaKoton, his younger brother, Ephraim, Yigdal Mimenu will be greater than him. V'zaru yiyem Eloi HaGoyim, and his descendants will fill the nation. Vayevorachem, and Yaakov blesses the two children, his two grandchildren. Vayomahu, on that day, and he says to them, B'cho yivorech Yisrael, with you shall the Jews bless each other. Lamar, to say, quote, Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'che Menashe. May Hashem make you like Ephraim and Menashe. Vayosem es Ephraim l'fnei Menashe, and he places Ephraim before Menashe. Okay, you all know the story. I read quite a bit from the inside because I want to discuss some of the nuances, some of the details here in the verse. But the story is that Yosef presents his sons to his father Yaakov. Yosef has two sons, Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe is the older one, Ephraim is the younger one. Yosef positions his children in such a way that Yaakov the father should place Yaakov's right hand on the head of Menashe, the older son, and his left hand, the weaker hand, on the head of Ephraim, the younger son, and Yaakov switches his hands. Yaakov switches his hands and he places his right hand, the stronger hand, on the head of the younger brother, on the head of Ephraim. And he places his left hand, the weaker hand, the hand that symbolizes less power, the hand that symbolizes the weaker hand. He places that on the head of Menashe, who was the older of the two brothers. And Yosef protests. Vayomer Yosef, and Yosef says to his father, Loi chein avi, this is not correct. You've placed your stronger hand on the head of the younger child. Zeh haBachoir, he points to Menashe. He says, this one is the older child. Put your right hand on his head. Yosef even goes so far as to take hold of his father's hand to make this transition. And Yaakov refuses. No, Yaakov says, Yodati b'ni Yodati, I know, my son, I know, says Yaakov. I know what's troubling you. I know why you're protesting. I know why you're upset about this. I know. But you're wrong, Yaakov tells Yosef. Ephraim, despite him being the younger brother, is going to be, his descendants are going to be greater than the descendants of the older brother. And therefore the implication is, Yaakov says, I insist, I must put my right hand on his head. Yosef does not respond, or if he does respond, the Torah doesn't tell us what he says. But Yaakov blessed them on that day, and he said, Ephraim and Menashe, my two grandsons, B'cho Yevorech Yisrael, by your names shall Jews bless their children for all eternity. Whenever a Jewish man or a Jewish woman will seek to bless his or her children, his or her sons, they will use these words and they will say, Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'che Menashe. May Hashem make you like Ephraim and Menashe. And the Torah concludes, lest you miss the nuance, lest you miss, perhaps, for the chance that you miss the important detail, the Torah concludes, Vayosem es Ephraim lifnei Menashe. Yaakov placed Ephraim before Menashe. Yaakov insists that for all eternity, when Jews bless their children, they should always say, may Hashem bless you, may Hashem make you, Yesimcha Elokim ke Ephraim v'chi Menashe, Vayosem es Ephraim lifnei Menashe, and he put Ephraim before Menashe. And of course, Yaakov's bracha is fulfilled. It comes to fruition. And to this day, 3,500 years later, we all still bless our sons in exactly this way, in the words of Yaakov Avinu, and we say it as Yaakov said it. We say, Yesimcha Elokim, may Hashem make you, ke Ephraim v'chi Menashe, and we say Ephraim's name before Menashe. This is the story as it is written here in the Chumash, the story, of course, you're all very familiar with. Many of the commentaries explain that the reason why Yosef protests, the reason why Yosef is unhappy with his father placing the right hand on the head of the younger son and the left hand on the head of the older son. Yosef, why did Yosef have to get involved? Was that the Gedaf Zacharein mission? Why did he have to get involved here? Why couldn't he just understand that Yaakov has his own cheshbonos, Yaakov has his own calculations? Why didn't he trust his father, or why did he need to get involved at all? So, of course, many of the commentaries make the sort of very obvious and glaring observation, which is that throughout Yaakov's entire life, this is a theme that's been ongoing from the beginning, right? Yaakov was the younger brother of his. Yaakov also had an older brother. Yaakov's older brother was Esav. And when it came to getting the brachas, Yaakov somehow managed to get the brachas that his older brother felt he deserved. The sibling rivalry started between Yaakov and Esav, between his own older brother, where again, Yaakov felt that even though he was the younger brother, for a pot of lentil soup, he purchased the Bechorah, and he was therefore deserving of the bracha that their father Yitzchak intended to give to the older brother. Yaakov got it. And then when it came to Yaakov's own children, although Yosef was definitely not the oldest, far from it, nevertheless, Yaakov shows particular favoritism to his son Yosef being the son of Rachel, to his son Yosef being the son of Rachel. Because of that, there's once again sibling rivalry. And now Yaakov seems to be doing the same thing. He seems to be taking, this time with his grandchildren. This is now the third generation where Yaakov is involved in the same kind of shtick. First with himself and his own brother, then with his own children, and now with his grandchildren. Where the brachas, Yaakov wants the brachas, the right hand of the brachas to go to the younger brother and the left hand to go to the older brother. So the commentaries say this is the reason why Yosef protests. Vayomer Yosef el Aviv lo yichein avi. Yosef says to his father, no, please, don't do this. In all three cases, in all previous cases, it's had disastrous repercussions. To the point where siblings are ready to kill each other over this. Esav wants to kill Yaakov. The brothers want to kill Yosef. All right, Baruch Hashem, nobody ends up dying. But still, it had seemingly disastrous results. We can understand Yosef's frustration here. We can understand Yosef's concern. He doesn't want jealousy, the same type of jealousy, the same type of animosity that existed between Yaakov and Esav, the same type of animosity that existed between Yosef and the brothers. Yosef, the father, doesn't want this to go to one more generation. He doesn't want it to be manifest in his own children. So he says, Lo yichein avi, he says, Tati, please, genug, enough of this. Ki zeh ha-bechor, Yosef says, if this one is the bechor, Menashe is the older child, place your right hand on his head. And amazingly, so that part makes sense. Yosef's reaction we can understand. But amazingly, Yaakov does it again. And Yaakov looks at Yosef and says twice, Yodati b'ni Yodati. He says, my dear son Yosef, I know what's troubling you. I know why you're concerned. I know why you're afraid. I know, I understand. But nevertheless, Yaakov insists, I have to put my right hand on the head of the younger of the two brothers. And blesses them and says, Yesimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'chemenashe, and makes it a staple in the relationship between every father and every child, and every parent and every Jewish parent and every Jewish child, that for all eternity, when children will be blessed, they will be blessed with these words. Yesimcha Elokim, may Hashem make you ke'Ephraim v'chemenashe, and Ephraim is put before Menashe. So let's ask the very obvious questions here. Question number one, why? Why is Yaakov stirring the same pot again? Yosef's perspective seems straightforward and logical. Yosef says, if this one is the older child, place your right hand on his head. Don't show favoritism toward the younger child. Don't create animosity and jealousy between the brothers. What if Ephraim and Manasseh would have looked at each other and Ephraim would have said to Manasseh would have said to Ephraim, wait a second, you're the younger brother. Why are you getting the right hand? And why is our grandfather telling Jewish people for all eternity that when they bless their children, Vayosem es Ephraim lifnei Manasseh, they should put Ephraim before Manasseh? Why? What if Manasseh would have gotten upset? What if Manasseh would have gotten jealous? What if Manasseh would have looked at Ephraim and said, younger brother, you don't know your place? What if Manasseh would have sought, God forbid, to kill Ephraim? As we've seen before with Yosef and his brothers, and with Yaakov and his own brother. Why is Yaakov not concerned about this at all? What is Yaakov doing? Can a man not learn from history? Can a man not learn from things that have happened, and not that have happened somewhere else? Not that have happened in a different part of the world, but that happened to him with his own children, and that happened to him with his own brother? Why the need to stir this up again? What is Yaakov doing, and why is he doing this? Question number 2. Surely Yaakov has some reason. Surely Yaakov has some kind of calculation. Surely Yaakov can see something that apparently Yosef can't see. Why doesn't Yosef just close his mouth and accept it? Okay. Surely the old father, surely the old Yaakov Avinu has some kind of calculation. If Yaakov does have a reason, why doesn't Yosef trust it? Question number 3. Yaakov actually provides a reason. Yaakov gives a reason why he's doing this. He says, you know why I'm putting my right hand on Ephraim's head? Because his descendants will be greater than Manasseh's descendants. Now I ask you, so what? So what? So what if Ephraim's descendants will be greater than Manasseh's descendants? But their descendants are not here yet. Right now, Ephraim and Manasseh are here. Manasseh is the older child. Why not put your right hand on his head? What's the problem? Why is the Torah making such a big deal out of this? We need to hear the whole story, and look how many details the Torah provides us with. Yosef positions his children with Manasseh on his left so that it would be on the right of Yaakov, and Ephraim on his right so that it would be on the left of Yaakov. And he brings them to his father, and Yaakov switches his hands, and Yosef protests, and Yaakov insists. There's like 15 psukim here dedicated to this story. Why is this such an important story? So he switched his hands. So what? He didn't give them different brachas. He gave them the same bracha. He just put his right hand here and his left hand there. Why does the Torah make such a big deal out of this? And then, of course, the greatest question of them all, which is, why do we have to go back to this every time we bless our children? Why did Yaakov make it so that every time a father blesses his children, every time a mother blesses her children, you have to say, Yesimcha lekim ke Ephraim v'che Manasseh, Ephraim before Manasseh, and dig up all of these unresolved issues in our ancestors' history? We have to go back to this every time you give a bracha. Let sleeping dogs lie. Every time you bless your sons, Hashem make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, and say Ephraim before Manasseh. And then we go back and we think, well, why is Ephraim before Manasseh? Manasseh was older, so why are we saying Ephraim first? Because Yosef and his father argued about this. Yosef said Manasseh should go first. Yaakov said Ephraim should go first. Yosef was concerned, sibling rivalry between Yosef and his brothers, between Yaakov and his brothers. Every time Jewish parents bless their children, we got to go through this again and again. And look how beautifully it stuck. Every Jewish parent who blesses their sons, Ephraim always before Menashe, always. Seems like whatever type of unresolved sibling rivalry went on over there. Seems like these stories, whatever it was, the younger child before the older child, seems like we haven't resolved it yet. We're still struggling with this. We're still looking at our children and saying, Hashem should make you like Ephraim and Manasseh, knowing that Ephraim is the younger child, but saying him before Manasseh, the older child. Why? Today, with Hashem's help, I'm going to present an insight here from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's more of a spiritual insight, or more of an insight from a Jewish historical perspective, but one which I think speaks to the heart of the pshat of the argument here between Yaakov and Yosef, and one which we can carry in our heads and derive great insight from in all of our avodas Hashem, in all of our service of Hashem and life in this world. Let's talk about Manasseh and Ephraim for a few minutes. Who were these boys? Who were they? Where did they come from? The Torah tells us they were Yosef's sons. Yosef yulad shnei bonim b'terem tovay shnas orov, the Torah tells us in Parshas Miketz. Yosef had two sons. Before the years of famine began, two sons were born to Yosef. Paroi had given him a wife, and she bore him two sons before the years of hunger began, because, as the Torah teaches us, during the years of hunger, it is forbidden to engage in procreation. So before that, Yosef had these two boys, number one and number two. And when they were born, he gave them names. The first one he named Manasseh, and the second one he named Ephraim. Why? When his first son was born, by the time Yosef's first son is born, he's in his 30s. All right? By the time he's in his 30s and his first son is born, he's already the viceroy, the second in command over the whole of Mitzrayim. Think about what Yosef is by the time. This is no child here having a child. This is no baby having a baby. Think about where Yosef is holding by the time his first son comes along. At this stage, Yosef had been orphaned. At this stage, Yosef had been chosen as the favorite by his father and treated as the favorite. By the time Yosef's first son is born, he'd already experienced dreams in which he himself sees himself being the king over the world. In exchange for this, he received the most brutal and painful treatment from his brothers, who wanted to kill him, but instead sold him as a slave and told his father he was dead. He ended up in Mitzrayim. He languished in a prison, but he interpreted Paro's dreams and told him what to do, and becomes elevated to being the most powerful, second in command, most powerful person in Mitzrayim for all practical purposes. And he has his first son in Mitzrayim. And he calls him Manasseh. Why? Why Manasseh? Says the Torah, when Yosef saw his first son who was born, and he held him in his arms for the first time, he said, Nashani Elokim es kol amoli ves kol beisavi. Yosef held this child in his arms for the first time. And he said, Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem. Hashem has made me forget my past. Yosef's past was painful. Yosef's past was associated with suffering, the death of his mother, the jealousy of his brothers, the persecution he faced. And he took his first son and he said, in his arms, and he said, Baruch Hashem. All the pain of my past is forgotten. Hashem has made me forget. Es kol amoli ves kol beis ovi, all of my hard labor, everything I went through. Hashem has healed me from my past. And so he names his first son Menashe, which means to forget, because his son, Yosef says, has made me forget, has allowed me to forget the pain of my past. And then he has a second son, and he names him Ephraim. He holds his second son in his hands and he says, look at this. Now I have two sons. Hifrani Elokim, Hashem has made me fruitful. Hashem has made me successful. Be'eretz onyi, in the land of my affliction. Yosef is now feeling successful. He's not just feeling healed. He's not just feeling like a graduate. He's not just feeling like he's moved on from his family's home, from his past, but he's now, Baruch Hashem, feeling his success. Hifrani Elokim be'eretz onyi, Hashem has made me fruitful and successful in the land of my affliction. So he names his second son Ephraim. Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe means Hashem has made me forget. Ephraim, my past. And Ephraim means Hashem has made me successful in the present and in the future. Okay. Every time Yosef sees these two sons, every time Yosef sees these two boys, every time he calls them by their name, Menashe and Ephraim, the names, the messages, the boys, his children, carry two messages. There is the message of Menashe, and there is the message of Ephraim. Menashe means Hashem has made me forget my past. Menashe was that firstborn son in which Yosef celebrated his healing and his being able to move on. And Ephraim was Yosef celebrating his success in the present and the future. But it goes a step deeper. What's the truth? Did Yosef really want to forget his past? Did Yosef really want to forget everything that had happened until he came to Mitzrayim? Did Yosef really want to forget his father and his father's house completely? Of course not. Yosef wasn't turning his back on his identity. Yosef wasn't turning his back on his family by naming his first son Menashe and saying, Hashem has made me forget. He wasn't trying to forget everything. Quite the contrary, the commentaries explain. The reason why there's a deeper meaning, the reason why he named his oldest son Menashe is because he wanted to make sure that he only forgot the pain, but not his roots. He only wanted to forget, he only wanted to heal from the scars, from the emotional and physical scars, the hurt that was caused upon him, that was brought upon him from the past. That's the part he wanted to forget. But not his identity and not his father and not his family. He never wanted to forget that. Ki nashani elikim es kol amoli, Yosef said. Hashem made me forget the pain. Hashem has allowed me to heal from my past. Now, said Yosef, every time he sees Menashe, now I can remember my past without it triggering me feeling like an abuse victim. Actually, Yosef's oldest son, Menashe, was really his link to his past. You see, it's kind of like if you tell a person, don't think about a pink elephant. If you tell a person, don't think about a pink elephant, of course, the very thought that comes into their head is a pink elephant. If Yosef is trying to forget his past, if Yosef is truly trying to redefine himself and reinvent himself and not remain connected to who he was, then he wouldn't have called his older son forget. He wouldn't call him Menashe, which means what better way is there to remember your past than to say, forget the past? But it's not the truth. Yosef wasn't trying to forget the past. He was trying to keep himself in check and make sure that he only forgot certain parts of the past, but not the important parts of the past. Menashe, Yosef felt, was his link to his father. But then Yosef has a second son, and the second son Yosef calls Ephraim. Ephraim was Yosef's time to look and say, you know something? Now that I see my past, now that I know where I came from, now that I haven't forgotten my roots and my identity and everything, where I was born and all the rest of it, Ephraim, his second son, reminded him, Ki Afrani Elikim Be'eretz Oni, to look into the present and to look into the future and say, the past is the past, was is given. And now I'm here to embrace the present and the future. And Hashem has put me in this place to work and to be successful. And Baruch Hashem, I have achieved. And so his second son, Yosef's second son, reminds him not to stay locked in the past, not to stay stuck in the past, to be anchored in the past, but to pursue a future, to pursue a present, to understand that Hashem has created a situation, has facilitated a situation where he's no longer living with his family, and he's able to move on to Mitzrayim and do what it is that he needs to do there. Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe, Yosef's reminder not to forget the important parts, the right parts of his past. And Ephraim is Yosef's reminder not to stay stuck in the past, but to embrace successfully, as Yosef does, the present and the future, and to be king and to be ruler and to flex his muscles as a king and as a ruler is supposed to. Menashe was Yosef's reminder that he had dreams in the past. And Ephraim was Yosef's reminder that those dreams are being fulfilled in the present. Menashe and Ephraim. Stop an average Jew in the street. Ask the Jew, is it important to study Jewish history? Is it important for us to remember where we came from? Is it important for us to remember, to tell the stories of our past, how we got here? Of course. Of course that's important. Are you kidding me? If we don't know our past, if we don't know our story, if we don't know the story of our people, we lose our connection to our very identity. Crucially important, absolutely. Okay. Stop the same Jew in the street and say, is that enough? Is it enough to simply tell the tales? Is it enough to simply reflect on the past and say, mein Babas and mein Zaydis and our great-grandparents, and is it enough to tell the stories of the past? Of course not. If we don't do anything with the present, if we don't build a Klal Yisrael, if we don't build a Jewish people today, what good is the past if we don't do anything with it now? Of what value is it if we don't build a brighter future? Of course, everybody knows we need both. We need the past and we need the future. We need Menashe and Ephraim. But here's the million-dollar question. You ready? Which one is more important? Which one is more predominant? Which one is more emphasized? Where do we place the greater importance? On remembering the past, or on building and preparing for the future? Which one is it? Of course, we need them both. If you don't know the past, you have no sense of identity. You don't know where we're going. You don't know what to do. If you only know the past and you don't do anything with it, and it just becomes a story, something we reflect upon that happened, then it carries no value. It doesn't get perpetuated into the next day, into the next generation. We need both, but the question is, which one is more important? Where should we place more emphasis? What should the rabbi's drosha be every Shabbos? Should he bang on the table and say, Chevra, don't forget where you came from? Should he bang on the table and say, don't forget your grandparents and your great-grandparents? Don't forget, Menashe, don't forget. Ever seen the way Jews run to shul for Yizkor? Oh my God, Yizkor. Yizkor brings Jews to shul like nothing else. Why do you come running to shul for Yizkor? Are you kidding me? It's an opportunity to remember my father, my mother, my grandparents, my great-grandparents. What could be more important than that? Or is it more important to stand up there and go, Chevra, the past was wonderful. The past was beautiful. The past was filled with great Jews, with great heroes, with Jewish men and Jewish women who sacrificed so much for being Jewish and for living as Jews. Of course, what are we going to do with all of that today? What are we going to do with all of that now? What are we going to do with all of that tomorrow? How are we going to teach this to our children? Education means we have to pass the torch. We have to figure out a way to communicate all of this to the kids, to the youth, which is wasted on the young. We got to figure out how to plug it in to the future. Which one is more important, Menashe or Ephraim? Menashe says, don't forget the important parts of the past. Ephraim says, invest in the future. Every time Yosef looked at Menashe, he remembered Yaakov, he remembered his anchor. His memory of Yaakov sustained him in the most vulnerable of moments. And every time Yosef looked at Ephraim, Yosef remembered and realized that he was brought here to Mitzrayim for a reason, and that Hashem had blessed him with success, and that he needed to use that success and do the job that Hashem had brought him here to do. Every time Yosef looked at Ephraim, he saw that he needed to move on and push the envelope further and take one step further. Okay. Now it comes the end of Yaakov's life. Now it comes the end of Yaakov's life. And Yaakov is going to bless the two grandsons, Menashe and Ephraim. And he takes a look at these two boys and he asks Yosef, who are these boys? Who are they? Of course, he knew who they were. But he was asking on a deeper level, what do these boys represent? And Yosef, the son, tells Yaakov, Bonai Haim, these are my children. The older one is Menashe. He's my connection to the past. The younger one is Ephraim. He's my link to the future. Yosef tells Yaakov, Menashe kept me connected to you. And Ephraim reminded me that I have to constantly push and pedal forward. And Yosef tells his father, Menashe is the Bechor. Yosef tells Yaakov, Menashe, my link to the past is the Bechor. He is the older child. He is most important to me. I hold on to him for survival. Sim yemincha al roisha. Yosef tells his father Yaakov, place your right hand on the head of Menashe. He is the more important of the two brothers. From Yosef's perspective, Menashe is more important than Ephraim. Why? Because Yosef lived a very challenging spiritual life. Yosef lived a life that was jam-packed with temptation. Yosef had to wake up every single morning and be a proud Jew in the worst spiritually and morally depraved country in the world. Yosef had to deal with Rishoim. Yosef had to deal with Paroi. Yosef had to deal with anti-Semites. Yosef had to deal with the worst depravity and barbarism and grotesque elements of human society. And Yosef had to feed them and sustain them and teach them. Yosef lived in the spiritual dirt every single day. And Yosef stayed at Tzaddik as he did this. How? He did this because he had an oxygen pipe. that he used to keep himself breathing. And the oxygen pipe was represented by his son Menashe, who never allowed him to forget where he came from. To the point, as we studied a couple of weeks ago, that even in a moment, the Torah tells us, where temptation gets a hold of Yosef and he suffers a moment of weakness with the wife of Potiphar, literally the image of his father comes to him in his head, and he sees his father's face in his mind, and that saves him. Yosef held on to the rope that connected him to the past with every fiber of his energy, and he refused to let go. And because of that, he was able to be who he was. He was able to be Yosef HaTzadik and be out there in the furthest and spiritually darkest place in the world, and able to remain a tzaddik and succeed as only a tzaddik can. Yosef carried himself with Jewish dignity and with pride. Yosef carried himself with the holiness and the elegance of a tzaddik. And he made a Kiddush Hashem every step he took. Because the most predominant message that Yosef told himself every single morning when he wake up was, don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you came from. Don't forget your source. Don't forget the good parts of your child. Don't forget the healthy part. Forget the negative parts of your childhood, but don't forget the good parts. Don't forget what your father taught you 22 years ago about Eglo Arufa. And it worked. So Yosef comes to Yaakov and says, Yaakov, these are my two children, Zeh HaBechoyer. This one, Menashe, is the older child. Him and his message have allowed me to do what it is that I do. And this one is Ephraim, the younger child, the one who represents my success that I've, Baruch Hashem, been able to have, because I've held on with all my strength to my past. And Yaakov looks at Yosef and says, Yodati b'ni Yodati. I know what you're saying. I know how you feel. I know how you operate. I know what you do. I know the Kiddush Hashem that you've made. I know the tremendous sacrifice and the price you've paid in order for you to do what you do. I know it all. And actually, Yaakov told Yosef, from your perspective, you're doing it right. You're doing the right thing. As a Yosef, as a person who wrestles and deals with the spiritual darkness of the world the way you do, you did the right thing by naming your older son Menashe. That did work for you. It helped you remember where it is that you came from. And it helped you stay connected. And it sustained you through the most difficult of moments. But, says Yaakov, my dear son, I have a different perspective. From my perspective, Ephraim carries the more important message, even more important than Menashe. While both need to be there, and Menashe needs to be the older of the two, because a person needs to remember their past first. But after they've done that, Yaakov says, I'm now going to give them a bracha. The bracha is going to carry them for the rest of their lives, for the rest of Jewish history. I'm now going to talk to you about 3,500 years of the Jewish people's future. And as I do, says Yaakov, I'm going to take my right hand and I'm going to put it on Ephraim's head. Why? You see, Yaakov said to Yosef, your life, what you do on an everyday basis, your entire existence is an Ephraim existence. You're out there, you're succeeding, you're making a Kiddush Hashem, you're living, you're preparing for the future, you're providing for the world. And so yes, you hold on to Menashe because Menashe facilitates the life that you live and that you do. Yaakov said, my time has come. I've lived my 147 years, and it's time for me to go. You know what my message to the Jewish people is? Vayosem es Ephraim lifnei Menashe. Always remember your past. But always remember, even more important than that, is to invest in the future. Ochi v'kotoin yigdal mimenu, the younger child, the Ephraim, will be greater than the older child, Menashe. Yaakov was warning Yosef, sometimes we can get stuck in remembering the past and not use it adequately, not use it sufficiently to build the present and the future. Or even worse, sometimes we can get so wrapped up in the past that we don't build the present or a future at all. The past is only as valuable as I use it today. The past is only as valuable, as powerful as we can teach the children to make use of it today and tomorrow. Invest, do, go, build. Otherwise, it's just a story. Sikelis Yodov, Yaakov switches his hands and places his right hand on the head of Ephraim. Ephraim produces more as long as he remembers the past, as long as there is a Menashe, as long as we don't detach. Ephraim's descendants are greater. Ephraim is the Jew who remembers where he came from, but isn't satisfied with that, and wakes up every day and asks themselves, what can I do about it now? And that, from Yaakov's perspective, is the son that deserves his right hand. It reminds me of a great story. If I've shared this with you in the past, I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat it, but it's worth repeating nonetheless. They say there were two brothers. One brother was a Rosh Yeshiva, and one brother was a businessman. Both religious Jews, both had beautiful families. One pursued the life of Torah learning, the other pursued the life of business. Baruch Hashem, both are successful. The Rosh Yeshiva has a beautiful yeshiva with hundreds of students. The businessman has a successful business and amasses a tremendous amount of money. Their children grow up, and a fascinating observation is made. All the Rosh Yeshiva's children go into business, and all the businessmen's children become Rosh Yeshivas. And one day the two brothers sit down and they're having this conversation. Isn't it fascinating, they say to each other. Look at this. We're both brothers. We both come from the same family. One of us teaches Torah all day. The other one sits in an office all day. The Torah teacher's sons go into business. The businessman's sons become Torah teachers. Why is that? And as they talked about it, a very clear picture emerged. The businessman said to his brother, you know, I work very hard. I wake up early in the morning. I wrestle and I handle and I negotiate and I wheel and I deal and I think and I plan and I strategize. I work very, very hard for many, many long hours. By the time I come home to spend time with my family, by the time I come home at the end of a long day, I don't want to hear another word about business. I don't want to talk about work. I don't want to hear about money. I don't want to talk about money. I don't even want to think about money. You know what I'm desperate for, said the businessman at the end of a long day? I'm desperate for a Blat Gemara. I'm desperate for a piece of Torah learning. Please give me some Torah. I turn to my children as we sit around the table on a dinner, on a Tuesday night dinner, and I say, will somebody please share with me a word of Torah, please? And if my children ever start talking about politics or what's going on in the world, I detest it. I've had enough. I don't want to hear one more word about what's going on in the world. Somebody please give me a Mishnah, a Halacha, a Rambam, a Gemara, a Pasuk, something please. And so said the businessman, my children see in me not what I do all day. They don't see that all day I'm busily handling and dealing with all the stuff that I'm dealing with. All they see is at the end of the day, what's dear and what's precious to me is Torah. So they grow up and they want to become Talmidei Chachamim, of course. And the Rosh Hashiva says yes. And me all day, said the Rosh Hashiva, I teach Torah to hundreds of students. And I teach Gemara, and I teach Rambam, and I teach Halacha, and I teach it passionately, and I teach it beautifully. And I have, over the years, I've accumulated thousands, tens of thousands of students, Torah scholars in their own right. I come home at the end of the day after studying and teaching all day, I'm exhausted. And as I walk through the door, and we sit down to eat dinner, I whisper quietly to my wife. I hope the children don't hear, but I whisper quietly to my wife, says the Rosh Hashiva, how are we doing with money? Can we afford to pay the bills this month? Can we afford to pay our children's tuition? Can we afford to keep the lights burning? How are we doing? And quietly, my wife and I hush back and forth to each other about our financial struggles. Said the Rosh Hashiva, my children don't see me all day studying Torah. They don't see that part. Instead, they hear me whispering to my wife at the end of the day about my financial concerns. And so the children become businessmen so that they don't have to worry about money. Of course, what they were saying was, sometimes children don't see what their parents do all day. Sometimes children are unaware of what their parents do all day. They only see what happens at night in the evenings. And despite what anybody may do or may accomplish, and very successfully for many, many, many hours during the day, and no matter how hard they work, when it's over at night, the children, the family get to see a different side of the heads of the household, of their father and of their mother. And that can have a very, very powerful impact on the children. And Yaakov was giving the same message to his son Yosef. Yaakov was telling Yosef, don't make the mistake of only teaching your children half the message. Yaakov was telling Yosef, don't make the mistake of being so insistent on giving your children what it is that you felt you needed to survive, that you don't give them in order with the message that they need in order to thrive. Yaakov said to Yosef, don't get wrapped up in your oxygen pipe, that you forget to teach your children about the blessings, the incredible blessings that Hashem has given you. Vayosem es Ephraim lefnei Menashe. Every Jew who will bless his children will mention both Ephraim and Menashe, but will always say Ephraim first. Ephraim is the optimism of a Jew. Ephraim is a Jew's belief that every day as we wake up, Hashem will help us and we will be successful. Ephraim is the belief of every single Jew that no matter what type of obstacles we face in life, we will overcome, we will prevail, we will not just survive, but we will build and we will succeed. Ki Hifrani Elikim be'eretz oni, because Hashem will grant us success. And yes, that necessitates, that type of success, that type of optimism of a Yid, necessitates a Menashe too. We always have to remember where we came from, of course. But we never get stuck there. Instead, every Jew should wake up every single morning and ask themselves, if Hashem has brought me here, if Hashem has given me these opportunities and placed me in this position, what is it that I can build? What is it that everything, all of our ancestors and everything they sacrificed and did for us until now, what is it that they've given us that we can make relevant today, here and now? That's more important than just remembering the past, of course. Of what value is it if we just remember and don't do anything with that memory? It's more important to seize the opportunities, to understand the significance and the importance that the past is here to teach us how to live our lives today. Before Jews say Yizkor in Shul, it's customary that the rabbis give a Yizkor speech. And rabbis spend a lot of time and emotional energy invested in the Yizkor speech as they think about what they should tell people. And I once heard a rabbi give a Yizkor speech, and he articulated it so simply and so beautifully. He said, if Yizkor is just about remembering, if Yizkor is just about the past, then I promise you, said this particular rabbi, the neshamas in heaven are not satisfied. They don't want, the people for whom we say Yizkor don't want us to just remember them. They want us to emulate them. They don't want us just to tell the stories of what happened. They want us to make new stories in addition to theirs. They want us to ask themselves, what would our ancestors do when they face their challenges? And that's how we know what we have to do when we face ours. Please God, one day we will have Ephraims and Menashes. We will bless our own children. Please God, one day there will be those who will look at us. And while, of course, we hope that they remember what it is, that the right choices that we made, the sacrifices that we made for being a Jew, while we hope that they perpetuate the good part of us, we hope even more that they'll be better than us. We hope even more that they will take it one step further and go higher and deeper and greater and keep building more and more and make the Jewish people stronger and grow further. And so the Torah concludes, every parent gives this message to their child every time they bless them. Yesimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'chi Hashem should make you like Ephraim and Menashe, and we say Ephraim before Menashe. We bless our children that in every situation in life, they should be blessed with optimism and passion. We bless them that they should be blessed with energy and an ability and a vision to see forward, to be forward-thinking Jews, to wake up every morning and say, yes, we remember where we came from, and more importantly, we're going to work to ensure and to build a bigger and better and brighter future for our children. Exactly the way Yosef did. Exactly the way Yosef did, who provided for his family despite everything they had done for him. We want our children to have that type of optimism. We want our children to look into the future and not only see the challenges, but see what it is that Hashem has given them the ability and the responsibility to do. And we want them to embrace it with open arms. We want them to remember that what we gave them, but we want them to take it to the next level. We want them to see and to create a beautiful world. And so we put Ephraim before Menashe. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos and much success in all we do. May Hashem, I conclude with the bracha. Yesimcha Elokim ke'Ephraim v'chi Menashe. May Hashem make all of you and all of us like Ephraim and Menashe. Good Shabbos.